President saying the U.S. will finish the job and finish it fast, and that the world is on the cusp of ending Iran's sinister hold on the war. We do have standing by here a panel to discuss the president's remarks. Retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfer is here with me, and so is Behnam Tailblue. He's studying Iran and has studied Iran, and he's with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Thank you both for joining us tonight. Let's start with you, Behnam. Let's just talk about everything that Trump laid out. That speech was about 20 minutes long. Did he say anything in this speech that gives us any further indication as to where this war is headed that wasn't already reported before tonight's address? And yeah, Behnam, it seems you might be on mute there.
Great to be with you, gentlemen. Listen, I think that speech was wisely used by the... Apologies. I believe that speech was wisely used by the president to be able to connect the dots for Americans as to why this has been such a persistent threat and why America made the investment in terms of blood, treasure, national reputation, and time even right now to focus on the Middle East, to focus on the Strait of Hormuz, to focus on taking on the world's foremost state sponsor of terrorism with the largest missile arsenal in the Middle East and with nuclear ambitions. Ultimately, I think time will tell as to will America take the military wins it has accumulated, and those military wins, particularly against the defense industrial base and the ability of this regime to project power abroad. Those military wins have been impressive. But how we choose to nest that into a post-war strategy against the Islamic Republic remains to be seen. To be brutally honest with you, I think there were no surprises, no curveballs here. The president had talked about a timeline about a couple more weeks prior to this speech. Seems like that timeline still very much is on track. If I had to put a nice bow on it, this was an attempt to handhold both markets as well as the American public and bring them along and make sure that they understood both the stakes as well as the interests at play.
The president facing intense scrutiny about gas prices and other economic pressures that his administration is facing in light of this conflict. Trump says U.S. forces will finish the job in Iran soon as the core strategic objectives are nearing completion. Hal, what does it mean to say Iran's missile and drone capabilities are curtailed? You've been tracking this just as close as anybody. What exactly has the U.S. done, and how much have they eroded Iran's capabilities in a month's time?
Well, Austin, significantly they have, and I agree with what Behnam said. I heard the speech. There wasn't anything surprising that really jumped out at me. It was kind of a recounting of things I've heard him say before. But he did want to make it very clear, and I think it was trying to cut through some of the discourse that's been going around to just basically say, hey, look, this is what we accomplished. And part of that is going after the drones and going after the ballistic missiles. The ballistic missile strikes on a daily basis are way down. They're less than 10% of what they were at their peak. I think they're around 5% or less right now. Same thing, the drone strike capability has dramatically diminished. And it is less than 10%, and it might be closer to 5% right now. The other thing that I thought he brought up, he mentioned bombers, but one of the big things that's changed what's happened over there is B-1 bombers and B-52 bombers. I should mention B-52 bombers, you may have seen in recent days, have been dropping these bombs, 2,000-pound bombs. I happen to have a little first-hand knowledge of what a 2,000-pound bomb can do. And it's a very impressive capability, particularly if you're going after underground facilities, those deeply entrenched facilities with a lot of overhead cover. We can now fly B-52 bombers well into Iran to hit some of these hardened targets. That's a capability we didn't have at the beginning of the war. Now we can do that. What he was talking, short recounting of what's been going on. But when you talk about taking out drones and ballistic missiles, we have a capability to do things against that particular threat that we didn't have at the beginning of the war. And I think he just wanted to make that, make that, stated, make it very clear. I think he could have gone further. I think he could have been a little bit more detailed than that, but they kept the speech on a certain level. And I don't think he wanted to get bogged down in the details.
Behnam, there has been a question about the strikes last year on Fordow, Isfahan, and Natanz. This was the B-2 strikes that hit a number of nuclear targets within Iran last June, President Trump said that they're monitoring these areas with satellites. I've had a question for a long time, and a lot of people have been wondering if this would be a reason to go boots on the ground to make sure that any nuclear residue, if you will, that might be left over from those strikes could still be used for something nefarious. President Trump saying that they're using satellites in order to watch what they're doing at those areas. Was that new information?
Not necessarily new information, because that was basically the posture of the U.S. military post-12-day war and post-Operation Midnight Hammer. But it is new in terms of the politics of the war, meaning I have long believed, that I'm trying to put pen to paper to this effect now, that militarily there's three pathways to victory. There's number one, which is exactly what Hal foot stomped, which is what the president foot stomped, which is the defanging mission against the long-range strike capabilities. That is well underway, and that is probably where the president will claim victory, quote unquote, on points. Number two is to really foot stomp the military win for Midnight Hammer, which is to either re-bomb some of those nuclear facilities that were bombed last time to further entrench and entomb the fissile material and other materials that were there, or to send in a team of special operations and ferry them out. This now, based on the options the president has been given, and just a few hours ago, it was reported that the president had been given a special operations mission, and he had reviewed it. No comment if he had approved it or denied it, but it seems like based on the speech today that he was not going to be going in that direction. But who knows, this could be low probability, high impact misdirection. But it seemed like that the president was going to instead keep a large amount of overhead satellites and intelligence and surveillance and reconnaissance assets to make sure that the Iranians don't go near or don't fiddle with or don't extract from the three nuclear sites that were bombed last year, Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan. And also on the third one, a third military pathway to victory, I know you didn't ask this, but also in terms of something that is slightly more surprising given the shift in the discourse from politics and security to energy and economics, the president really putting the burden more so and really kind of linking his statements over the past 72 hours to America's transatlantic friends and other European partners about the imperative for them to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The one issue, one area in the speech I would take issue with is that the strait itself will open up, quote unquote, magically. It is correct that the Iranians physically haven't impeded the strait. There's about 10 to 12 mines. There's been drone strikes. There's been missile strikes. But ultimately here, we don't want the Iranians to end up retaining the kind of control that they exert now, where basically they have a toll booth set up where they're getting a multi-tiered entrance system. Because if many of these countries, which don't have powerful navies, are trying to get commodities in and out of the Persian Gulf or through the Strait of Hormuz, they might find it cheaper and easier to negotiate with Iran bilaterally, and then Iran will have them over a barrel. So that's really the one area of the speech that I would take issue with, because the U.S. has been focusing on the straits, on the energy, on the economics, on the market side of this conflict, and to leave the Islamic Republic in control of the strait as well as in possession to really threaten the strait and to regulate commerce in the strait, that I think is in and of itself dangerous. So I'm not shocked about the U.S. posture related to nuclear because we've had the ISR there. We'll probably keep it there, if not probably double down, perhaps even give an ultimatum to the Iranians that if they go towards these sites, there could be another strike. There was a story in Reuters today that said that the president might adopt an occasional, I don't want to use the word mowing of the lawn, but an occasional return to re-hit if the Iranians do go towards these nuclear facilities. But the shocking thing was number three, given the president's own interest in energy and economics and the ability of the Iranians thus far to flip the script on U.S. partners that are dependent on Persian Gulf oil and really charge them a fee to enter what is an international waterway.
Thanks to the progress we've made, the president said, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly. How? In military terms, what does shortly likely mean?
Well, shortly probably means weeks, not months. And I think 2 to 3 weeks is what I heard before the speech. It wasn't quite clear from the speech if he was going to stick hard to that. But it was basically what he was saying, hey, look, this is the objectives we set out. This is what we've accomplished. I think he laid out that pretty well. I think the one thing that kind of left open and Benham kind of hit on that was the Strait of Hormuz. And he basically saying, hey, we're going to pull out, but it's not. In so many words, it was kind of getting around to it's not our strait. And part of that is a simple reality. We don't know how well mined the strait is, how well the Iranians have used midget subs and other means to mine that strait. We do know that they are they're basically rerouting ships to go up near Hormuz Island, away from the international sea lanes. It's kind of that toll booth, if you will, that $2 million toll booth to charge some passageways. I can't imagine that we really want to leave that in place. I can't imagine that the other Gulf states are going to be satisfied with that. So I really do think if this might be a preparation, and President Trump is kind of famous for using strategic misdirection, if you will. He'll come out and say this stuff, and you go, "Oh, okay, I guess we're not going to do something." And then the next morning, you wake up and we did some huge strike somewhere, whether it's a strike or a raid or something like that. So this may be a speech that he's giving, kind of recounting why we're there and what we're doing in preparation for putting boots on the ground. But the boots would be a raid. And I really do think that we're looking hard at these islands in the Strait of Hormuz. And if we control the islands, then we essentially control the Strait of Hormuz. But I think the reason you keep saying we're going to pull out is just a simple recounting of reality. We don't have a lot of minesweeping capabilities. Minesweeping is a painstaking, difficult, not a particularly glamorous thing. And since the end of the Cold War, that's just not an area. Minesweepers just do not get the attention they deserve. I could get into how we put a lot of money into littoral combat ships, thinking they were going to pick up that mission, and that never quite worked out. But who has minesweeping capability? Our NATO allies have quite a few minesweepers, very capable. They could go in there and do that. Japan has quite a few minesweepers, and South Korea has a few minesweepers. And so I think when he's saying pull out, he's really, he doesn't say minesweepers, but I can tell you strategically, he's thinking about that. He's thinking about the escorts and everything else that's going to go in there and clear out those sea lanes in order for them to do that. So I think part of this is he may be giving a speech in preparation for potentially putting boots on the ground, if nothing else temporarily, but maybe to seize those islands. I also want to point out something today is the UAE was making some statements to kind of indicate that they may be wanting to get more involved. And when more involved for them might be retaking those 3 islands that they claim as sovereign territory, Abu Musa, Greater Lesser Toomb. I think they're looking at that, and I could see a combined action between the U.S., UAE, and potentially even Saudi Arabia, where we might look at doing some things in there. And I don't see us staying in there when he says he wants to withdraw, but I could see us going in there, doing the assault portion, take it, and then hand it over to another country like Saudi Arabia and UAE, and leave that to kind of sort itself out. That's kind of what I was hearing from the speech, was this idea that he was going to pull out. When he's talking about naturally open up, I'm with Benham on that. I was kind of scratching my head. I don't know what naturally open up really implies, other than you leave it to your regional partners to kind of monitor and sustain this thing after we've left, and hopefully entice Asian and European partners to come in and use their capabilities to clear out the strait of any potential threats.
President saying to those countries that can't get fuel, many of which refuse to get involved in the decapitation of Iran, I have a suggestion. Number 1, buy oil from the United States. And number 2, build up some delayed courage. Go to the strait and just take it. Iran has been essentially decimated. The hard part is done. Benham, as our resident Iran expert, who are the countries that get the most fuel from this part of the world? Who is President Trump directing this message at?
Well, there's quite a few countries. Some are U.S. adversaries, some are U.S. allies. I would say look to East Asia, Northeast Asia in particular. I would look at China, Japan, South Korea. But also there's a constellation of other countries like Thailand, for example, that depend on Persian Gulf trade. There's a lot of places that you want to pay attention to, whether you're looking at fertilizer, whether you're looking at helium, whether you're looking at petrochemicals. That stuff goes far out as well, both to U.S. partners, again, as well as to U.S. adversaries or to U.S. frenemies, we could even say. So I don't necessarily want, nor do I think would it be strategically wise in an era of great power competition, deeper Chinese enmeshment in the Persian Gulf. I mean, they already buy oil from both sides of the Persian Gulf, the pro-American side and the anti-American side. And funny story, they buy more already from the Saudi side, the pro-American side. And to that end, I think there is a political logic there that the president has rightly touched on. Why should we secure the oil routes and trade routes for our adversary, particular a rising rival power like China? But on the flip side, because oil is a global commodity, it's subject to these same price shocks that we're seeing today. The price is set globally. This is, again, based on supply and demand. We will be affected by it anyway. So therefore, I would say it is an American interest. And it's American interest to actually keep some of these powers out. If you look back to the last time the U.S. was involved seriously in the Persian Gulf against the Islamic Republic of Iran, you go back to the tanker war, the Iran-Iraq war. And funny story then, the Kuwaitis, who had issues with exports through the Strait of Hormuz, they actually called President Reagan and they said, can you help with the reflagging? And first he said no, rightly looking at the risk reward as well as the cost. But when you widen the aperture and you see this as an issue of geostrategy rather than geoeconomics, the Kuwaitis turned around and called the Soviet Union, then that certainly got our attention. We said, no, we'll do it. And that's the story of U.S. involvement in the tanker war, particularly the reflagging mission there. Ernest Will, Nimble Archer, Praying Mantis, and the rest of the story of those three major operations. Ultimately now, I would say pay attention to the way some of these countries that can't do what number 2 is, but can do what number 1 is. Some of these countries have shifted. Some U.S. partners, some U.S. trading companies have shifted to get, either light oil or a different kind of crude from America instead of the Islamic Republic or instead of from countries that are exporting from the Persian Gulf Basin. But that is just short-term switch. Perhaps the president is right to talk about how can we make this a bit more long-term. But ultimately, those countries don't necessarily have the naval capabilities to protect the kind of commerce that they are dependent on in terms of hydrocarbons from the Persian Gulf. And so what this means in the short term is that not that they're going to go in and take it, but instead that they're going to have to go in and be subject to this Iranian bullying when it comes to the toll booth and perhaps even pay to delay or pay to play, which is something, again, I'm very worried about because I don't want more U.S. partners paying off the Islamic Republic because that essentially keeps the regime in power and makes the regime understand how critical of an Achilles heel this is. I want the regime to pay a price for having touched this Achilles heel.
Al, final thought. It appears President Trump is still keeping his options open. You mentioned the boots on the ground idea a little bit earlier. I'm hoping you can expand on that. What is ultimately the strategic benefit of the president, even though he says he wants to wrap this thing up within the next 2 to 3 weeks? What is the strategic benefit to the president saying he's going to be keeping his options open regardless?
Well, I think that the strategic benefit is that he hasn't closed anything off. I have to tell you, the number of times I've heard the question, when is the war going to end? Everybody asks that. And, and everyone is expecting to hear, well, it'll be on April 9th at 10 p.m. It's just not going to happen. It doesn't work that way. He's keeping his options open. He's basically recounting what's been done to make it understand what capabilities have been taken off, how the threat that Iran posed has been, I think he may have used the term eviscerated in there. I don't know if it's been completely eviscerated, but I will tell you, it is vastly diminished from what it was. I certainly don't see them getting a nuclear weapon. So I think he did a good job there. But what I think he's doing is he's kind of preparing people for where his options may go. He's also trying to calm the markets. And I kind of took that, if I had to draw a kind of an overall impression from the speech, I felt a lot of it was really aimed at the markets to say something and to calm their fears of where this is going. Of course, everyone is very much afraid that we're going to get drawn into some of these long wars on terror like we had in Afghanistan or Iraq or something like that. And I think he was making it very clear when he started recounting, our duration of time in World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and then he eventually got to this and said 32 days. I think he was trying to basically say, hey, look, don't get overly concerned that we're going to be in there forever. He campaigned on staying out of these wars. He's made it very clear he does not like these long wars that draw our resources away. So I think he was doing a pretty good job trying to convey that. But I do think he's keeping his options very much open. He's looking at the ground. And Benham mentioned some of the countries that definitely have are big stakeholders in the Gulf back open again. A number of them have significant capabilities to be very useful there. And by the way, pulling back our forces, I think he's kind of signaling to them. He's said it outright. I mean, it's not like he's quite hinting at it. He's told the Europeans, hey, get down here and provide support. But he's making it very clear. He wants to pull U.S. forces out. and have them come in. And there's a lot of things that they can do in that regard. I think of a number of countries in Asia that could step in, although I have to say, the idea that we're opening the door for China to get more involved in the Persian Gulf does leave me kind of wondering about the strategic direction that we're going there. I don't know that we want to open up another big waterway for more Chinese naval involvement.
I have so many questions, Behnam. I'm going to throw you one more because President Trump has signaled that this is going to go on for weeks longer. And if there is no cooperation from the Iranian regime, we could still see escalations. Is it clear to us, what level of clarity do we have on the level of communication that U.S. officials and Iranian officials have had up to this point?
Well, it seems to be indirect, if anything at all. There's been talk of this Pakistani mediation most recently. I think just a few hours ago, reportedly, a senior-ranking Iranian diplomat, a former advisor to Iran's supreme leader, his home was reportedly struck. Reportedly, his wife was killed. He, again, reportedly, that's 3 reportedlys in a row, was part of the negotiating team with the Pakistanis trying to get the Americans to change their interlocutor previously from Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to potentially in the future someone like Vice President J.D. Vance. So certainly there has been these back and forths. These back and forths have allegedly been on paper or via intermediaries. So it's not like the Geneva negotiations or the Oman negotiations, both of which took place prior to the commencement of this conflict on February 28th. But moving forward, I would say this is a question the American public should be asking, which is, who are we negotiating with? What is left of this zombie regime, particularly given the successes the president and, more importantly, the Israelis have had in going against the military and political elite in that country? And in particular, I would not be so bullish, shall we say, to say that there has been regime change. If anything, it looks like there's been devolution, a hardening of the military men at the helm of the Islamic Republic, even in a regime that looks like the Islamic Republic today, which is kind of a zombie regime, headless, flailing in different directions. I would be very much worried about that, and I would have some real issues with can whoever, be it indirectly that the U.S. speak to, be able to deliver in the medium to long term. And I think the answer there is no, which should induce more short-term caution and really raise the urgency for us to get a military win here, rather than rely on the Iranians giving people via some kind of deconfliction or ceasefire agreement a face-saving line of retreat. And to that end, while he himself has denied it, Iran's parliament speaker, the U.S. reportedly has confirmed it, that someone like former Tehran mayor, current parliament speaker, IRGC veteran Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf is one of those interlocutors in the Islamic Republic. I just had a piece in the Washington Post yesterday with a colleague and friend. I'm hesitant to plug the piece, but I will just tell you, he's no Delcy Rodriguez. The Islamic Republic of Iran is not Venezuela. I know the U.S. is keen for musical chairs. I know the U.S. is keen to do less with more in the region. No one is looking to have another forever war in the Middle East, but the Islamic Republic is, as much as it's not Iraq and isn't going to be subject to a long land occupation, it also isn't Venezuela, where there was no regional spillover effects and the military conflict was over in less than 3 hours with the dictator of that country secured and extradited. I mean, this conflict has gone on for a month already, and the Islamic Republic is still impressively firing missiles, admittedly at a lower rate. So neither the state nor society nor the military capabilities of Iran and Venezuela is the same. So I would say, in short, we should not be looking for a Delcy in Tehran. I think there's no way out but through here, and that it would behoove the president, who unfortunately did not mention today the Iranian people, that Iran is home to the most pro-American and most pro-Israeli society in that part of the world. It would be a shame to miss that and just settle for musical chairs at the top. And so while that was missing from his speech today, hopefully that makes itself more apparent in U.S. strategy towards Iran in the weeks and months ahead.
Behnam, Hal, appreciate you. Thanks.